Do you like scary movies? Well, if you do, here are 10 facts you didn't know about Scream.
Hello, Sydney. Do you like scary movies?
Hello, my fellow Dreadites. Welcome to Dread Alert. I'm Vince, and today we're talking about the father of the postmodern slasher film, Scream from 1996. And you better believe I was there 3 times in theaters seeing this when I was a teenager. In the opening of this film, Roger L. Jackson and Drew Barrymore never met face-to-face. They did all of their work together via live phone line. The props department actually didn't disconnect the phone, and Drew Barrymore kept accidentally calling 911 to the point where the cops showed up at the set and they had to kind of explain themselves. Drew Barrymore turns in an outstanding performance in this, and she and Wes Craven had talked about certain triggers that would get her to an emotional state prior to the shoot, and Wes Craven would give her a keyword that would send her over the emotional edge. The film was also lit by a blue TV screen, which if you have a VCR in your house or you had one in the past, you'll recognize that as the Channel 3 input blue screen before you turn on a VHS. This was intentional as the character was about to watch a scary movie. The opening gives us the first appearance of the Ghostface, or Father Death mask as it's called at this point in the film. The mask was found when they were location hunting in a box in the garage of a homeowner. They asked if they could keep the mask and the homeowner said, sure. They took the mask to their design team and asked them to create something similar. The design team wasn't quite sure they could achieve this and gave a few iterations of masks, and none of them lived up to the original 5 and dime store mask. The costume itself was supposed to be a white robe until the producers suggested a black robe would be scarier, and that gave birth to the Ghostface we know and love today. The establishing shot of the high school was accomplished in 2 ways. First, it was a crane shot, but it had a camera operator riding the crane. As the crane reached the ground, the camera operator stepped off and followed up with a tracking shot. I think this is some really creative camera work and direction. This movie was not without its controversies. First and foremost, the high school where they planned to film revoked their permits based on the live her alone scene. This scene was iconic, and I can't imagine this movie existing without it. You may notice a note in the credits offering no thanks whatsoever to the Santa Rosa School Board, and now you know why. There were also 2 lines in the film which caused Kevin Williamson to get a ton of flack. The first being when Tatum mentions pausing all the right moves to see Tom Cruise's penis, and the second is the Richard Gere gerbil rumor story. This film is full of cameos and nods to other Wes Craven projects. In fact, Sheriff Burke played Sergeant Parker in A Nightmare on Elm Street. Linda Blair from The Exorcist appears as an obnoxious reporter, and Wes Craven himself plays Fred, the janitor, wearing the original Nightmare on Elm Street Freddy Krueger costume. No stripes on those sleeves. Now here are some fun actor facts. In the scene where Jamie Kennedy is telling Jamie Lee Curtis to look behind her, it's actually Skeet Ulrich in the Ghostface costume, one of the few instances where him or Matthew Lillard is actually in the Ghostface costume. W. Earl Brown, who plays Kenny, actually gained 20 pounds for the role because of some of the dialogue about Kenny being overweight. He felt it was his job to look the part. Taking one for the team for sure. In the climax of the movie, when Randy has a limp after being punched in the face by Gale and thrown off of the car, Jamie Kennedy put a giant rock in his shoe to get the limp right, to the point where after a night of filming, he almost had to go to the hospital. Some of the most famous lines in this movie were improvised. In fact, Kevin Williamson thought that Stu was one of the most underwritten characters, so it doesn't surprise me that Matthew Lillard saying things like, "You hit me with the phone, you dick," or "My mom and dad are gonna be so mad at me," were improvised lines. In fact, the "you hit me with the phone, you dick" came because the blood on the phone was too sticky, and when Skeet Ulrich went to throw the phone at Matthew Lillard, it stuck to his hand and ended up hitting Matthew Lillard for real in the back of the head. So that was an honest reaction. And speaking of honest reactions, Skeet Ulrich had open heart surgery as a child, and while everything went well, he still had a really sensitive area of scar tissue on his chest. Now they padded him up and protected him for the scene where Neve Campbell strikes him with the umbrella and punctures him. The umbrella had a collapsing tip, but she missed the padding and hit him right on that scar tissue, leading to a very real scream from Skeet Ulrich. The themes of this movie are probably pretty obvious, but I want to take a moment to talk about how they got to the screen. Kevin Williamson wrote this script to subvert expectations. He wrote it without nudity, and he really wanted to highlight the violence of the film. And Wes Craven, the same thing. He wanted to talk a lot about how movies don't make monsters. There are knives and knife images throughout this movie, from the moment when Drew Barrymore pulls the knife out of the knife block in the opening, to the freeze frame on Michael Myers with the knife when Jamie Kennedy is explaining the rules of the genre. Knives are a prevalent image hinting at that violence. Nowhere is the theme as clear as when Billy and Stu are stabbing each other towards the end of the movie. Wes Craven has said that this is the moment where the violence gets too real. and the consequences become real and their plan starts to unravel. There's also a theme of a new day dawning at the end. This moment was actually shot at sunset, and they only had 2 takes because of where the sun was in the sky. They were writing Gail's dialogue and her news report on set and feeding it to her moments before they shot it. When Sydney puts her finger into the umbrella wound that she gave Billy moments earlier, this wasn't in the script. Wes Craven added it as a way that she could injure Billy, and also as a reversal of the sex scene that took place upstairs, further subverting expectations. The script originated with an idea Kevin Williamson had while house-sitting. When he was house-sitting, he noticed an open window that he didn't remember unlocking and he didn't remember opening, and he was worried there might be someone in this unfamiliar house with him. He called a friend up who was doing the typical ch-ch-ch-ch, ha, and he corrected him and said, that's actually ma from Friday the 13th. And he said, are you worried Michael Myers is going to get you? He said, no, that's Halloween. Until the idea was born about a phone-based killer who played horror movie trivia with his victims. Let's talk about Scene 118. Scene 118 took half of the shoot to complete, and it's half of the movie's runtime. The cast and crew had shirts that said, I survived Scene 118. It was massive, and it all takes place at Stu's house. This house was abandoned. It had been built by an older couple, and they had passed away within a month of each other, and so this big, beautiful house had sat pretty vacant until the film moved in for production. The party scene is one of the most memorable aspects about Scream, and one of the most memorable fun facts about the party scene for me is that Kevin Williamson had to explain to Wes Craven what a beer bong was, and went out to the store and bought the parts and built the beer bongs that you see in the movie. This movie has a few stunts in it, specifically the actor playing Ghostface, but I also think of the excellent window fall from Sydney's stunt person. But one of the stunts that stands out to me is one that they had to do in one take, and that's when Ghostface gets hit with the beer bottles. They gave a PA 2 beer bottles and said, you look like you're a pretty good thrower, so throw. And the PA nailed Ghostface in the gut and in the head, and that was all done in one take. Another stunt that was quite challenging for them because of the pain involved was Rose McGowan's garage door death. Apparently that rig was very painful for both Rose McGowan and her stunt person. And lastly, the stunt person playing Ghostface is the person who created Ghostface's infamous knife wipe. He did it to preserve the knife continuity regarding the blood spatter. It would be hard to make sure the blood was the same between takes, so he solved the problem by wiping it off. I can't imagine how gooey his gloves were by the end of the shooting day. And lastly, the director's cut. I was lucky enough to pick the VHS box that I liked the most, and when I got that tape home, I put it in and noticed the film was a little different. Some sequences were a bit abbreviated, and some sequences were a bit longer. This was the director's cut of the film, and I loved it. First and foremost, Steve's death was much more graphic, with his insides slowly falling outside. In fact, the actor who played Steve was in the final running to play Billy Loomis, and they kind of gave him another role in the film, which I thought was really classy. The next thing that was different in the director's cut that I noticed was a slow push-in on Casey Becker's body in the tree, a reference to Suspiria of all things. They had to remove every other frame to speed that up because the MPAA said absolutely not, it's too gory. And you were forced to sit with that image in the director's cut, but I also kind of like the jumpiness of the theatrical release. Both are really unnerving, both for different reasons. The third thing that you'll notice is different in the director's cut is that garage door sequence we just talked about. They linger on Tatum's body in the garage door just a little longer, and the MPAA said no way. The last thing that was trimmed down was Kenny's death. Once his neck is cut, he has a look of recognition on his face of what's just happened to him, further anchoring in that horror of the violence that's just happened. And I think that further plays into the themes that Wes Craven was trying to convey. It's just a shame that it had to be lost to the cutting room floor. Let us know what you thought. Did you learn anything new about Scream today? If so, leave them in the comments, and stay spooky, my friends.